thing where I have Dan Hernandez with me on every stream, because if not, I don't know what to do with myself. But
I'm the comedic relief. I'm just the fanboy today that got lucky enough to be on this call. So I'll be an avatar for everyone out there. So I'm glad to be back. Hey, everybody.
And with us is a very special guest, legendary artist and co-creator of The Boys, among many other titles, Mr. Darick Robertson. Darick, thank you so much for joining us on this. Yes, we are not worthy. I will be the Garth to your Wayne Dan.
We're not worthy.
We're not worthy.
I was just laughing with my friend because my local paper is featuring a championship yo-yoer. I don't know what the word is, but it's on the front page because he's featured in a Netflix documentary. And I'm like, I live in this town, and I just found out President Obama's a fan of The Boys. So,
just a little bit of a big deal, right? Just a little bit of one.
Maybe come talk to me. So clearly, I'm not that.
Well, you're going to be in that paper one of these minutes, any minute now.
My local paper.
The local paper is going to be like, what?
Seriously, it's the kind of paper where, like, when the grocery store is closed early, it's a headline.
Yeah. I worked for those types of newspapers for many years in New England. I'm very familiar with that lifestyle. And a lot of them don't. A lot of the newsrooms don't even know who all lives in that town. It's surprising, like, who you run into at the grocery store.
No, absolutely.
For sure. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. What I figured we do for this live stream is more of a Q&A and go over some of the mechanics that we built for the board game and talk to you about what your time was like and has been with The Boys. And so let's just jump right in here to the Tabletop Simulator. If you guys missed the stream yesterday, Dan, Benji, and I all played together. We were getting close to beating Homelander. We played like a little sped up version of the game. And if you guys are unfamiliar with the game, you can check us out on Kickstarter. We do have a couple time slots left where you can schedule a playthrough with one of the designers. You can email us at onefirstgames Inc. INC. So the number one, the word first, games with an S, inc@gmail.com. And we will do our best to schedule as many of those as we possibly can up through the end of the campaign, which ends on December 24th.
Dan said good things.
The game, I just am going to say, for people out there thinking about it or interested in the game, like I've played a lot of complicated board games in my time, and what I thought was really interesting is that after playing a couple rounds of The Boys, it actually wasn't as complicated. It was so intuitive. It was so addictive that I was really impressed by the design and the balance that Josh and the team have managed to do. Plus, being The Boys and being something that I love to begin with. So I was really impressed. And if you have a chance to schedule one of those time slots, I really recommend it, because having them take you through it is a lot of fun. And Benji and I, had to go yesterday, but we're really bummed that we couldn't play it out, because we were having a really good time, and we're looking forward to getting our physical copy so that we can play at home and stuff. But anyway, it's a great game, and I think sometimes people are nervous to take on. It's like, oh, is it going to be too complicated? Is it going to be too hard to understand? And it's really not at all. It's intuitive and organic, and so I was very impressed by our playthrough yesterday.
Keyword for me was intuitive. You say intuitive, I'm like, oh, good.
And that's really what we strive to do.
You'll have an advantage because you created these characters, so they'll be on your side.
I don't think. Well, with gameplay, I think there's a little bit of a, the nice thing about this whole experience is that, for years being, of course, so intimate with it as I worked on it day and like the deadline I just finished that I was describing to you earlier is equivalent to like what I would have to do on a regular monthly basis to meet the deadlines for The Boys comic. And so that time becomes very intimate when you're, in these characters' heads trying to make them emote, so it makes sense to the audience what, we were trying to convey. But now it's something so much bigger than me that, I can't really, like, it's almost like I'm sitting back and watching it happen as an observer more than a participant. But I'm grateful. I mean, I don't want that to sound like false modesty. I'm really excited that it's taking off like that. I mean, like I said, finding out Barack Obama loves the show. Like,
yeah, breaking news today was that Barack Obama, when he was writing his novel, or his book, his memoir, I guess, was watching The Boys as a way to inspire himself and relax, and really looking at the characters and watching the things that you guys created, and that adaptation take life and flip the normal script on its head, which was fantastic.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Like, just to be on Barack Obama's radar. It's like, former president likes the show.
Not just likes the show, but used it to kind of decompress and like refresh his brain. And I mean, Darick, like, could you have ever imagined as you were creating it that it would become what it has become? And now that it has become this, like, does it feel like your children have gone out into the world, or does it feel like it's a wave of, that you're riding a wave that you kind of are just trying to stay on top of it? Or, like, how does that feel? Because I've had, I wrote Detective Pikachu, but I didn't create those characters, right?
Well,
I didn't birth them as a. But because I was looking at the board game and what I think is great, one of the things I like about the board game is that all the characters are really spotlighted, like the whole recruitment of the characters. And I was looking at the designs of each of the characters going, gosh, Darick did such incredible work designing each and every one of these heroes that are sort of reminiscent of sort of, there's clearly superheroes, but they're all completely unique, and there's things that we haven't seen before, like Swatto, like things like that. So how does it feel having done that, having accomplished that?
It's really great in that, I always feel like my job is to get into the writer's head, so I would never take sole credit for, how these characters came to be. It has everything to do on a lot of levels with Garth Ennis's great imagination too. And we were very symbiotic in the time that we were creating that book. So, for me, it does feel like my children are let out in the world, because moreover, at this stage of the game, it's what Eric Kripke has steered this thing to become, because it isn't, verbatim the comic, and the designs, like, when I was first seeing the casting come in, when I first saw Jack Quaid, he had walked into Golden Apple Comics on Melrose in Los Angeles and bought all kinds of boys comics from my friend Ryan. And Ryan took a picture of him holding it, and it was the first time I'd seen who had been cast as Huey. I hadn't, the studio hadn't showed me yet. So I get this text from Ryan. I'm like, Huey looks really tall. And then I looked him up, and it turns out, like, yeah, he's like 6 foot. He's taller than Mother's Milk. And for me, like, wait a second. And then I saw Carl Urban with the beard, and I'm like, he's going to shave the beard, right? Oh, no, we want to keep the beard. So I was like immediately going, all right, I'm not a TV producer. I make comic books. My comic book has been made. It's been finished for a while. Let's just see what they do. I trusted that Eric Kripke knew what he was doing. And, that was faith well placed, because you look at Jack Quaid in the role, and Jack and I have become friends, and he's amazing. He from the moment you see him holding those dead hands, which is a scene that I asked for before they even started filming, and Kripke was kind enough to make sure it was included. But that reaction, like, he's Huey in that moment, like, you're right there where you need to be. You're empathizing with him, and you go on that ride, and then in comes Butcher, and Carl's amazing. And I was excited as hell when I found out Carl Urban was playing Butcher, but they gave him a beard so he'd contrast with Huey more. They made Huey a New Yorker rather than a Scottish kid, so they wouldn't have competing accents. Because when you're reading something, it's very different than when you're listening to something and when you're watching something. So it's a different experience with a comic book than it is with a TV show. So, but everything that makes The Boys work is alive and well in that show. And that's why I think it's hitting the audience the way it is, because that's the part I couldn't predict. When you were asking, like, did I ever think? When I first got the script to Boys #1 and I sat down and read it, I was like on fire. I'm like, I can't believe I get to draw this. This is going to be amazing. Because I knew what, we were capable of. It was, I just come off the Transmetropolitan. Garth had recently come off of Preacher, and I knew that combination. We had already done some good work at Marvel together. I knew we were going to create something original that was going to be good, but I just thought it was going to be a good comic, But to see it come this far, because in the wrong hands, this could have been awful. This show could have been terrible. Because if you don't understand what makes the book tick, if you hadn't really read the comic, a good example, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings, but saying it, but it's true. A good example is Mystery Men. I was just thinking about Mystery Men the other day, and how, if you ever read Bob Burden's original comic, it had such a different tone, and the sense of humor and the way it was played out was so much more on point as being what it was meant to be satirically, that when you see the movie, it's missing that element for an effort to make the silliness of the characters the forefront of the story rather than the heart of the characters, which is what makes that work. Because in the Mystery Men comic book, they don't see themselves as ridiculous, but in the movie you can tell that they do. And that's the problem, like where the comic and the thing that they made from the comic don't quite line up. But with the Boys, even with the changes, you can tell that Kripke and Rogan were fans, and they told me so. And then, so the steering and the writing and the way the film is cast and the deadpan way the actors play the role, although there's great comedy in it, which is absolutely essential, because that story would be a long, hard slog if it was just focused on what makes it filthy and dark, because it does get very dark and it does get very filthy. But if you don't have the comedy and then the element of romance, which is alive in that comic as well, you don't quite understand why the Boys works. And so it's really, and I said, you can do whatever you want in the world of producing things and creating things and adapting things. And you can tell everybody in your crew or everybody around you, like, how great it is. But if it doesn't hit the audience and the audience doesn't respond, you're just patting yourselves on the back. So the reaction to the show is what I never could have anticipated.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Oh, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I was just going to say, sometimes, as a screenwriter, you go into a meeting and you take a meeting on a property, and I'll just pick a fake property, Fantasy Island. Let's say it was Fantasy Island. This is not a real example, but sometimes they're like, you know what the problem with Fantasy Island is? The fantasy and the island. We've got to change it. And you're going, I feel like people kind of like the fantasy element of the island. Maybe we shouldn't, maybe we keep that. And they're like, no, we thought about it. That's the problem. What if it's not an island? What if it's a suburban community?
Right.
And I
reality
think,
parking lot.
What if it's a reality? And so I think that sometimes there's a tendency to sort of like, you get these IPs or these franchises, and then people that don't understand the sort of the DNA of it want to alter it in such a way that it's like, why are we even doing this? Yeah. And one of the things that I felt the same way about the scene where Huey has the hands, because I remember reading the first issue of The Boys and being completely, there's only a few times I've been shocked by a comic book, and that was one of them. That moment of, oh my God, I can't, like, it was just so brutal and so just horrible, horrific. Yeah. And for that reason, it was in that moment I was like, okay, I think they get it. And we're in good hands. And you can sometimes feel when you're in good hands with the show.
That's why that moment
pun intended,
was so
right, Dan?
important to me. No pun. Yeah, I
get
it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you're right though in that. Like, I remember one of the more shocking things from seeing the documentary, John Schnepp's documentary. Rest in peace, John. His documentary about Superman, and when Nicolas Cage and Burton were going to be making a Superman movie, and there was a moment in there where they were talking about, okay, we're going to make Superman, but he doesn't fly and he never wears the suit. Don't make a Superman movie. It's like, why would you bother to get the IP to Superman and take those main elements out of it? It's and then call it Superman. Like, that's not, Nobody's going to want to see that movie. Nobody's going to want to see the movie about. I mean, call it something else. Like Brightburn is a great example of.
That's what I was gonna
say. Take the mythos, do your own thing with it. Made a great movie, but you don't say we're going to give you a Superman movie and then no Superman. It's like that terrible Captain America movie from the 90s. I don't know if you ever saw it. He's got the rubber ears because they didn't just cut holes for his ears. But, like he spends most of that movie, like for one, the theme song is like an acoustic guitar. Like it's Captain America. And it's I'm going home on the river. And then, and then he walks around most of that film with his mask off and a jacket over his suit like he's embarrassed by it.
I remember back in the 90s, you could only get that, and I think the Fantastic Four. Like, do you remember at the conventions there was always like the VHS tape, and it was like the bootleg Captain America, the bootleg. So it always felt like a piece of contraband to me. Like, oh, you shouldn't have this.
You shouldn't have it. We still have that Roger Corman Fantastic Four in that format.
When we were fortunate enough to be able to take the IP and adapt it into a board game, that was the first thing that we got together and talked about is how do we stay true to the world that you and Garth created while incorporating as much of the comics and the characters and all of the fun items that you guys had built together into a game, which is why we took that narrative of not just replaying the comic, for example, but really immersing the players into the game. And as newly activated CIA agents, they are completely unfairly tasked with taking down Homelander because other efforts have not worked. And your job then is to build as good of a team and as strong of a team as quickly as you can before Homelander wipes out the world, because he's unhinged. No one can control him anymore. Now, without spoiling too much of the storyline, some of the characters don't make it to the end. They're not that lens to it that keeps the players immersed in the game, immersed in your guys' story, and can play an infinite amount of times. And thank you, Dan, for that, for being an intuitive game that it's not stale where you're constantly doing something else.
I'm just excited there's little figures.
Yes. So yes, we do have miniatures.
I love figures.
We do have up on our Facebook page for an additional miniature to be included in the stretch goals is a fan favorite vote. The voting ends on Sunday at noon Pacific, and so far Lamplighter is leading by a lot.
Lamplighter.
That
surprises me.
Well, so
what are the other choices?
The choices that we put up were Malchemical, because I thought that could make a really great.
With his tentacles out.
With
and everything.
The tentacles out, yeah, exactly. Lamplighter was one of them. Voss was one that was written in, or Love Sausage.
Love Sausage would have been a good one.
Why is my computer not loading? Fun times in COVID, your internet just decides to cut out sometimes, and you can't pull up anything.
It's always right when you need to access something quickly. But I will say, Lamplighter is a good choice. The design of Lamplighter is awesome.
I wonder if that's due to the popularity of him on the show. He was played.
That's probably my guess. Yeah.
The actor who also played Iceman. So.
And then being able to hold the torch, it could be like a really interesting figure. And why can't I pull this
I was
up?
Like the kid who when they had the Mousetrap game, like I wouldn't bother to play the game. I would just put the thing together so I could get the little figure of the diver to go into the thing. Like that was me.
Yeah. To watch him
I didn't bother to play the game or assemble it. I just put it together and played with the figure. So
Darick has a serious figure collection. I mean, one of the most.
How many characters do you think you have? Like how many miniatures?
I couldn't count. I'm literally surrounded.
And are they like all different types, or like are they Funkos, or is there a particular brand that you particularly like?
My original action figure collection started with the Migos back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So I still have them. I'm looking at them right now. They're on a shelf in front of me. But I have a serious fetish for Star Wars and Star Wars figures especially. So I have a lot of the Black Series figures. I have I like the 6-inch figures a lot. So I have a lot of those, but I do have Game of Thrones from Funko. I've got a Rocketeer. I've got a lot of the DC classics that Mattel put out. And yeah, it's like I got, and then a lot of 12-inch figures. I like those a lot too.
Darick and I have become like super friends over the course of this. One of the best things that happened this year is that Darick and I have become like, we haven't actually hung out in person, but we talk like almost every day.
That's only because of COVID.
Only because of COVID. But one of the things that bonded us was our super love of figures and, you know, all of this stuff.
And so we
like he gets comparing studios. So like if he gets a sweet one, he's like, look what I got. And I'll text him like, oh, Darick, check out what just came in the mail. So it's the figure. I understand why the figures excite Darick. That speaks.
All right, so I finally got it.
Well, I found out that they're going to make 1/6 scale. Like I think it's Medicom got the license. They're going to be doing the like 12-inch boys figures. And I saw a little glimpse of Homelander's shoulder. So I'm like, oh, please send me comps.
Well,
I don't know if they will or not.
So you'll definitely get one of our Homelander busts, which is a paintable 140 millimeter bust. And then in the deluxe edition, which is already included, you'll get Huey, Mother's Milk, Butcher, the female, and Frenchie. And then once the stretch goals are unlocked, it'll be Starlight, Queen Maeve, Soldier Boy, Terror, and then whatever the fan favorite is. Among the choices that we put out were Malchemical, Big Game, Critter, Lamplighter, Shahemoth, Popclaw, and then a fan write-in. So there's been some fan write-ins for Love Sausage, and some for Gumchum. Which I thought was pretty funny. There is a huge fan of Gumchum who wanted to make sure that he is in the game and appears, and yes, he does as a beta character. That is a player that you can have.
That might have been one of Russ Braun's issues.
It could have been. The one of the questions that we just got was, you said that you wrapped up your art on the boys a little while ago, but that's not all the way true, because with the Dear Becky series that Garth finished, issue 8, you were kind enough to draw a variant cover of the boys playing our game, which will be featured and given to everybody at the retail tier and above once the Facebook page reaches 1,000 likes, and we're getting pretty close to that as well. What was that process like for you, going back, because we talked a little bit about that. What was that like for you to redraw the team again, because you haven't done that in a long time?
Yeah, it was fun. I'm going to see if I can, pardon me if I'm a little distracted, I'm going to see if I can do a share screen and show that piece of art while we're talking about it.
That's what I was trying to pull up. So let's see here.
I have it here. I just don't know. I'm not very good at Discord, folks. So.
Oh no, you're doing great.
Excuse me while I'm distracted here. I think I found the art. Now let's see if I can do a screen grab without giving away my personal information.
That is the trick, isn't it?
Okay, let me see. First, I'm going to open it. But it was fun revisiting the team. Because I haven't drawn them all together. I did one of the Dear Becky covers was me drawing the team, but in an early incarnation before Huey joined. It was, and they're all sitting around Mallory, but that was the only. But this was a lot of fun. Okay, let me see if I can.
Technical difficulties are always so much fun.
What do you got? Can you see it? Are you guys seeing it? I can see it.
I am getting nothing there. Hold on just a second. I'm going to see if I can pull it up here in just a second.
It says live. Is that it?
Oh, there you go. There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
All right, cool. Can you still see me or just that artwork?
We can see both now.
Oh, good. There's I can't believe I pulled that off.
I was nervous.
Another new trick.
Intuitive. Thank you, Discord. That was intuitive.
And if you can't see it as well, you can go to our Kickstarter page or the Facebook page. There, that is a nice blown up image with beautiful coloring and detail. And we're immensely honored to have that.
Thank you.
As the variant cover for that. There also are some deluxe editions that come with a signed tip-in, because you were so gracious that you were willing to sign some of those tip-ins of that art in black and white. And so if that is something that you guys are interested in, you can go to our Kickstarter page and back at that tier. For the gameplay, I know you didn't really get to play a lot of it, Darick, but when you saw that this game was being made, what was your initial reactions for something like that?
Well, my first reaction was I thought it was going to be a video game. So I was really surprised and kind of delighted to find out it was going to be a board game. Mostly because both my kids are big gamers. Like they really they love video games, but they also very deep into D&D and role playing. And, so the idea that I could actually sit down and we could have a game that we could play of the boys, that was pretty exciting. And then when I saw you were making figures, as I said, that really made me happy. I was also really happy to see my artwork being used in the game. So that was flattering. So overall, I bet I'm sort of more intrigued by it than I am anything else, because I haven't had a chance to really explore how it works. So it looks like fun.
Well, like I said, I'll get you and your kids signed up on the tabletop simulator so you guys can play around with it and check out the board and the cards and all the mechanics there. When going on your other projects that you're working on, tell us a little bit about what you just finished up, because I know you were under a massive deadline for this project.
Yeah, I just finished the last issue of Hellblazer Rise and Fall with Tom Taylor for DC's Black Label. And issues 1 and 2 are out. I think the issue 3 is going to be a little late into getting to the fans, but I really want to emphasize it's worth the wait, because there's one of two ways when books get behind schedule. I got a little sick in October, so I apologize. It was kind of beyond my control. And then there was some shakeups at DC that everything got a little derailed. So I'm sorry that you won't get it in January. You're probably going to get it in February. But that
worth
aside,
the wait. It's worth the wait.
Yeah, but it is probably one of the best finales I've been able to put on a book, because a lot of times
that's saying a lot.
When things go wrong, they'll bring in other people, or they'll start, the cooks start running in the kitchen, but they were kind enough to just give me a little extension, and I worked really hard to meet my deadline, and I did. I'm taking these off because I'm so washed out here. It's casting shadows. But I worked very hard on this last issue, and Tom wrote a great story, and I penciled and inked the whole 132 pages, and I'm really proud of it. It's probably one of the largest projects I've done pencil and inking since the early issues of The Boys.
And I've got a question here. Who is your favorite character to draw in The Boys?
Oh, that's hard to say. I mean, it's sort of like asking me which is my favorite kid. I love them both. So within the team, I always answer this, who was my least favorite character to draw, because I actually enjoyed drawing everybody, but I didn't really like drawing the Deep very much.
Interesting. Okay.
Because the version that we came up with was supposed to be semi-ridiculous. He's an underwater character with a cape. That should clue you into how firmly our tongues were in our cheek right there. But he's that helmet, Garth had asked for that antique diving helmet as part of his costume, and I did everything kind of around that. And that's very hard to draw. Plus, you can't really make the character emote, which is kind of the joke that Garth was going for, and that he wanted him to, they'd be all at the table around the 7, meeting, and they'd ask the Deep something, and he saw like this, and you couldn't quite understand him, So, and then but I couldn't really show his face. And then that helmet was very meticulous. It's like drawing a car. I don't really like drawing cars very much either, because they have to be precise. Otherwise, they don't look like cars. They look wrong. So that helmet was really no fun to draw. But out of all the characters, I really like drawing Huey, and because he was always fun to make emote. Mother's Milk always came very naturally. So whenever there was a lot of scenes with Mother's Milk, I always felt like I just knew him. Like I just intuitively knew how to draw him. Butcher was always a challenge because he had to have this just so expression on his face. Like he knew what was going on when nobody else did. And then Frenchie was fun too because he was always over the top, and his interactions with the female were always really fun to draw.
Was there a moment while you guys were creating these story arcs where you were hit differently? Like Dan, I think, was eloquent in his response with when Huey's holding her hands, when he's holding Robin's hands, your whole heart just sinks. Was there another moment like that for you where you were like, yeah, this is different?
There's a scene in, I think it's issue 20. It's the whole scene where they recreated really great for season 1 of The Boys, the show, but where they're on the airplane and they're trying to save the plane, and then Homelander just gives up because he screws up. My child was really young at the time, so that scene where he comes to the window, it's on the cover. It's hinted at on the cover, and then you see it within. But Homelander shows up and he just pulls the door open, and the kid is sucked out. And off he goes, and the mother's just freaking out because her kid got sucked out the plane and all. And Ennis kind of played it for comedy because it was supposed to be that kind of a here he is, there he's gone beat, and then Homelander doesn't care. But like because I was a father of a young child at the time, like it made me kind of nauseous to think about that in detail. Like if I was that mom and I watched my kid go out the window, I'd be like, I'd lose my mind. And so that's kind of how I drew the mother reacting.
We have another question here from Lordry Khan. How are things going with Oliver? He's one of my favorite books of recent times. I'm so keen to see more.
Thank you. I'm very eager to get back on it. I had a very rough launch, being that I had plans and everything in 2020 managed to corrupt them. So my hope is to get back into doing an Oliver this year and put the final arc out. So thank you for being a fan. I'm glad to know it didn't do real well, and that might be because I put it out very slowly, but I'm proud of the work. But so I need to kind of plot my way back into finding time to work on it. But both Gary and I are committed to finishing it. It's just a matter of not if, but when.
And then
and thank you for
maybe word will spread in the interim. Sometimes things need a minute to kind of gain momentum as people get turned on to it. So
it was just a real hard year with everything. Everything, comic book stores closed down right as we put the trade out. And my hope was I was going to put the next few issues out right along with the trade paperback, because there's a collection of the first 4 out there. And I just felt like everything conspired against me doing that. And, it's not a big moneymaker for me, so I always have to balance it out with other work. So it's a passion project at this point. But I do believe once it's all collected, it'll find its audience, because sometimes that happens. I did a book called Transmetropolitan that sold very poorly by DC standard for, a lot of its run. Like we were on the verge of always being late and almost canceled. And now it's like very beloved and it's been collected, and the people are finding it through the collections even today. But back in the day, it was as a monthly comic, it didn't do very well.
Is there a place that people can pick up Oliver? That's one of the other questions.
Yeah, it's you can see it. You can read it on Comixology.
Okay.
And if you can't get to a store, if you got a local comic book store that's open, please go ask them to order it for you. There is a collection of 1 through 4 out there, but if you can't find it that way, it is available through Amazon and through Comixology.
Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, everyone checked Oliver out, but Transmetropolitan, exactly what you described is how I got turned on to it. Like in my hometown of Coral Springs, Florida, which is, very suburban kind of, not a lot going on, but there was a kiosk in the mall, and I would, hang out it was like next to the food court, so it was perfect for me. So, but and I saw the first trade of Transmet, and that really transformed everything. I think I was right at the stage of, not to say that I don't still read superhero books, because I do enjoy them, but I was coming out, I was like in end of middle school, going into high school, and it was right when I think you start to want to transition into. I want to feel like mature now. I want to feel like I started reading Preacher at the same time, Transmet, Sandman, all of those things kind of hit me at once, and it really transformed my sense of what was possible in this medium. And so for me, Transmet was the one that really just gosh, it like every panel, every page just lives in my heart because I've read them over and over and over and over. It's just the best.
Well, and again, that's
one
what
of the nicest things.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I was just
saying one of the things I hear often is that people loan out it keeps selling because people that loan it out don't get it back. So it's a good sales technique. I wish I could have planned it, but
in that manner, though, also that's how The Boys has struck a chord with so many different people, including, as we said earlier, former President Barack Obama, who in his interview talking about his book said The Boys, for how they turn superhero conventions on their heads to lay bare issues of race, capitalism, and the distorting effects of corporate power and mass media, which is a massive concurrent theme in the Boys comic and then in the adaptation to the show. Was that something that you and Garth
president of the United States? That coming from a former president of the United States, that's a pretty profound observation.
It's a good blurb for the back of the book.
Yeah, for the DVD set that will never come out.
But when was that a theme that you and Garth, like when you guys set out to build this in issue 1, was that something that you guys were thinking about? Like, we want to change the script, as they say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when Ennis first approached me about the whole thing, he told me we were actually going to try to very, very early in the planning, we were going to try to make it fit within the DC universe the way Hitman did. And that it was always going to be like implication and suggestion that the superheroes in the DCU were up to no good. But really early on, we started to realize that was going to be it was going to fall flat. It was going to be like, sugar-free soda. We rethought it. And then I brought up, I think at the time, or I don't remember exactly because it was a lot of years ago, but I know we discussed how the Watchmen took archetypes and made their own story out of them. And we thought that would be a better way to go. But his idea always from the conception was that he wanted to show that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that if you had all this power in the wrong hands, you would have the Homelander. I'm a staunch lover of superheroes ever since, like I said, my first toys were Migos. And so I have a deep affection that he doesn't have for American DC Marvel universe, which is why his take on DC and Marvel is always so unique and funny and original, because he doesn't come at them with the reverence that I have for them. Mm-hmm. And so I personally think, when it comes to when people say, oh, this Homelander, Superman, and the deepest Aquaman, I'm like, no. That's totally wrong. Superman would never do the thing Homelander would do. Superman would always do the right thing. Homelander does what he wants to do. Homelander does what he thinks is going to be good for him. Superman does what he thinks is going to be good for everybody else. Anyone could put on a Superman costume. That doesn't make you Superman. So like our two takes on that, kind of like, so we worked kind of in a yin yang way in that regard.
No, I think the partnership obviously played out fantastically, because you can see on the page your guys' vision is consistent throughout, and it really has that the story arc draws you in right from page 1, panel 1, and keeps going throughout the entire series. One of the other questions we have here is, with the release of Dear Becky, have you thought about revisiting any of your other works, such as Transmet or Ballistic?
Ballistic, maybe, but there's no immediate plans for that. Transmet's done. We told the complete story. I way back in the early days of Transmetropolitan, I think in the first year that we were doing it, I actually flew out to London on my way to go live in Italy, which I did back then. And I went via London so I could meet up with Warren in person, and we discussed maybe doing prequels of Transmetropolitan, which I kind of still want to do, but when we revisited it a couple of years ago, I brought it up to him, and we kind of both came to the conclusion that it's good just the way it is. And sometimes going back and adding something diminishes it. And we think that Transmetropolitan is just a really great 60 issues, and going back and adding more or doing more to it probably would come with an expectation we couldn't live up to. You know, like kind of like imagine like a great sci-fi fantasy trilogy set in outer space and everyone loves it. And then like, you know, the creator goes, let's go do prequels. And people don't like it as much. I mean, crazy, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's ever happened before.
Never happened.
Hard to imagine, but I'm going with it. I agree about Transmet in the sense that I won't spoil it, but it's a completed thought with one of the great endings, I think, you know, for me, that so I think there is something to be said for you know, really articulating exactly what you mean to articulate and then saying we're done now. You know, this can exist, can be absorbed by people, new generations of people growing up who you know come across it and not feeling the need to you know overly tinker with things and try to like recapture lightning in a bottle. But it's very tempting.
And that's what Warren was saying, is that, you know, where he was in his head when he was drawing that, like he's not there 20 years later. He doesn't know that he could recapture that energy that he poured into Spider. And for me, I miss drawing Spider, but at the same time, I can sit down and draw Spider whenever I want to. And he's probably one of my most asked for commission pieces. Like if somebody gets a commission for me at a convention or whatever, they usually ask for Spider Jerusalem. So it's like, it's not like Spider is gone for me, but the original ideas for the prequels were one called Transoceanic and Transcontinental. And Transoceanic was Spider's like on a cruise ship for a number of days. And I'm like, I don't know what that was going to be, but yes. And then the other one was him traveling the world. And I'm like, yes, because I'd love to draw what the rest of the world looks like, because I was always in the city. And then except for the refuges. And I think one issue he was in Paris briefly, but I hadn't even been to Paris myself at that point, so I didn't really know what I was doing. But I love the idea of it, but I think, again, it's almost better as what could have been than, I don't know, delivering something that isn't great. Hellblazer, Rise and Fall, like that's me working at my A game. I'm happy to be moving forward, but you know, every once in a while I miss Spider. I miss being in his head. I miss knowing what's going on in his head.
One of the other questions I just got here. So with you and your boys being fans of games and board games, what kind of games do you like to play?
I don't get to play very often. My favorite game in the whole world is trying to be good at this. Because every time I level up, there's something to be said for, and I'm never going to be as good as I want to be. And also, like, video games to me are like crack. So if you never ever want to see another Darick Robertson comic in the world, allow me to play video games, because that's all I'll do. and I won't, and I have a hard time putting them down. So I don't play them because I know better. But when I do, I usually play with my kids and they're teenagers and they know their stuff. But the best game I played recently that I really want to finish is Detroit Become Human.
Oh, yes.
Which is an amazing game. And I love the interactivity of it. And I have this dream that if there was ever going to be a Transmetropolitan game, that it would be somewhat like that, where you can make choices as you go, but you can explore all these worlds. I like to, I guess in Red Dead Redemption and
don't let him play Cyberpunk.
Came out. He's playing Cyberpunk right now. And but apparently you can go into, like, you can explore the world and open doors and go into shops and things like that. Like, that's the way I would want to transmit. I dreamed of that back in the 90s before we had the technology. But I want a Transmetropolitan game to be like that, where you can go through, you can explore things that aren't even part of the game plot. You can just explore as well as follow the plot. So that would be my ideal Transmet game. But Detroit Become Human is the closest I've come to playing a game that feels like that. And I really like, not only are the graphics amazing, and not only is it super cool that, Lance Henriksen and Clancy Brown are in it, but, I love the idea of the game. I love the plot of the game. I like that it can be a different thing each time you play. That's exciting to me. Like the creativity of it is almost like I feel like I'm watching a movie that I have to interact with to get to the end, and that's fun. I like that kind of game. I'm less interested in the games that are just perfunctory, like I have to shoot a ball into a thing, or I have to shoot a guy's head off in order to move forward, or kill as much as I can to run my score up. That's fine, but that gets boring for me pretty quickly.
So the narrative is really the most important part for you.
Yeah, I really like a narrative.
And that's why we were so honored to have you and Garth, check out the game and give us your brief feedback. Because I know your time is very short and limited, but that's really where we were at, was how do we create that narrative in the board game so that it's not just, do this X, Y, Z, move here to A, B, and C. But you've never played the same game twice, and you really are immersed in the world that you and Garth had created.
Well, that's really important to me in any kind of gaming, in that it's sort of like and that actually comes back to like the comics, in that, if the comics are just punching and gross stuff and shock value, that gets old pretty quick. And I without naming names, there's comics like that out there. If that's what you get off on, if that's what your thing is, then you'll find that comic. But to me, the real art of the Boys comic was that there was a real story going on that was much deeper than the shock value that would, get you through, like it was good always to have it's always good to have those moments, because, and Garth writes them better than anybody. But beyond that, you really want to have something to return to. You need to care about the characters that you're reading about. Otherwise, it just falls flat, in my opinion. I lose interest if it's just, gross for gross sake, or violence for violence sake. I need a point to it. And I'm known for drawing violence, but it's because I draw what evokes, when I'm drawing violence, it's what I'm afraid of. Like, I don't want that to happen to me. So I try to make it as horrific as possible. Plus, like, the action of reading a comic book is very different than watching a show, in that you get to choose when you're moving on from an image, as opposed to a movie, which presents things to you in a certain thing. Like a good example, since we keep talking about the scene where Robin dies, that, I love what Dan Trachtenberg did when he directed the first episode of The Boys, because in the comic, you're reading, everything's fine, and then boom, something happens, and then Huey's, you see the shock, and then you move on from that scene. And you could stare at that panel that I drew of Huey holding the arms as long as you want to. That's your choice. But in the show, Dan slowed it way down and dragged it out, so where something's happening and you don't quite understand it until you see that little bit of blood hit Huey's cheek, and then it builds from there, and then it goes back into real time, and you see what's happened. But by slowing it down, he brought that shock value out in a whole other way, like a whole other layer. And it was two totally different ways of telling the exact same scene.
Yeah.
And it's a really great side-by-side comparison of how comic books can tell a scene, and how how a scene unfolds on film when it's the exact same story point and characters.
Well, and similarly, that's kind of what you and Benji did, Dan, with Detective Pikachu. Without spoiling the movie, if you haven't seen it, there is one scene that plays out from different vantage points, and you get a lot different information each time you watch that, and you're really immersed in that story, and you care about those characters immediately. Like, you guys were able to create language and dialogue and scenes where CG characters become so involved for you, and you are vested deeply in those characters.
Well, thank you. I just, what I was thinking about when Darick was talking is it's a really interesting point that he made, that it is, there are two visual mediums in between, comics and film or television, but in both cases, especially, with that Huey moment, this is at least how I have interpreted it for many years, this is the defining moment of the rest of his life in some ways, or at least the catalyst for the things that follow. And so it needs to be presented in such a way that we as an audience understand the choices that he makes subsequent to this moment. Right, like that we, and that's why I thought it was really effective in the first episode of The Boys, by slowing it down. It allows the audience, it allows the horror to land on the audience, so that when he does make a series of choices that maybe not everybody would make, we understand where this is coming from. We understand the trauma that he's just undergone, and why someone like that would make the choices that he does. And so when you're writing a screenplay like Detective Pikachu or whatever, there are moments where you have to kind of trust that the audience, like that you have to write in such a way that that you're hoping that the audience will not only see the what's literally on the screen, but sort of the emotional subtext of everything else that's going on. And I think that those are the moments that are the most effective in, certainly for me in Detective Pikachu, when the scene you mentioned, or when he's first walking out into Rhyme City, and you see, going back to our shared love of Star Wars, Darick, my thought was I want it to feel like the cantina scene in A New Hope.
Oh yeah,
right.
I want it to feel like we're seeing a bunch of people. We're not really explaining all of these Pokemon. We don't really necessarily, especially if you don't know anything about Pokemon, we don't necessarily understand what they do or why they do this. But we know that this world no one seems very concerned, and everyone's just kind of going about their business. And Luke and walked in that bar, and everyone's like, whatever, I've got my own stuff to deal with. And I wanted a similar feeling. And so sometimes when you're a screenwriter, you're hoping that the director and the actors and all of the great production people can capture that kind of the emotion, or sort of the, like I didn't say to anybody, I want it to feel like the cantina scene, but I wrote it in such a way that I was hoping it would have a similar quality, and they completely nailed it. And that was very cool.
Yeah, that nuance is there for sure.
That feeling too, like that, and that's what I loved about the film when I saw it, is that I didn't know a lot about Pokemon, but I got, and again, that through line with how important the characters are, and that their own internal stories are the point. Like I could have just been an animated movie about watching Pokemon fight, and it wasn't. It was like you had this whole other through line with a mystery to be solved and a father and son relationship. All those things are really important to that plot, and that drew me in more. And then the jokes landed harder because of that stuff too.
Yeah, and I think that it's what Darick was talking about before. It's you want to. I mean, certainly the content of The Boys is much more extreme than Detective Pikachu. Thankfully we didn't do that in Detective Pikachu, but it
now
is
I'm imagining that because that's my jam. Space Fever is essentially that. So.
That's we'll talk offline. But
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
No. Which is that is balancing those components, and that's the thing that I think that The Boys does incredibly well. Even, especially the way that Darick was describing the some of the violence and the way that he approached drawing the violence. Sometimes you can pick up on something as a reader without necessarily having it explicitly explained to you, because I have felt the way that he just described about those moments, which is, yeah, some of them are funny or shocking, but they never feel like tossed off. They never feel like this is not having an impact on the people that are seeing them. That this is right. that the horror lands on them too, and I think that as a reader that then translates to you, because suddenly these things, like Darick said, that could be treated sort of flippantly, have a weight, and that balances sort of the drama of the series and the and the comedy and the over the topness when that's appropriate. And I think that for any writer, artist, creator, like, you're looking for that balance of things. I don't like things that are relentlessly dark. That for me is something that I tend to shy away from, because I find it, the world is shit and everybody dies, and I kind of knew that going in. I'm not learning anything. Something like that.
It's like watching the Hostel movies for me. Like I saw them once, but it's not something I want to revisit a bunch. Like seeing people getting tortured. It's if there's a good reason for it, like Marathon Man, I'm interested. But when you can tell you're just being kind of like brought along for the sake of the horror is just the horror, I'm less interested.
I think that speaks to this. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just I was thinking about comics and film again. Like I was realizing if I drew the scene with Huey the way that it was in the pilot, that would be like a 12-panel page. Like it would be close up of Huey. Next panel would be a little more blood. Next panel would be a lot more blood. I could do it. It could work, but it would be a very slow read. Like I don't know if it would play out the same way it does. Will Eisner has an incredible book on sequential storytelling, and he shows the two different ways. Like one of the ways that he shows a clock in the background and then a drop of water, and the panel remains static, but the drop drips in each panel, and then you get the feeling of time moving. So like each panel is like a panel break is like a beat in time. So you have to like, and crafting a page is also about guiding the viewer's eye through it. There's an invisible line that you kind of create that if you are hung up on the art, you're not doing it right. The art should almost disappear, which is unfortunate for a lot of good storytellers in comics because the reviews come out and the writer's the only one credited, but the story has been told to you by an artist. And a lot of times if the artist is overlooked, it means they did a really good job.
Well, and I think that just speaks to the narrative of being honest and true in your work and being genuine with the stories that you're telling and the narratives that you're sharing with people. I know Dan has to go. I want to thank you both so much for all of this. This was an absolute blast and an honor for me.
This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for checking out the game with us. We will have some more special announcements coming up in the next day or so about the campaign. So please be sure to check out the Kickstarter page for that and put in your pledges for the deluxe edition or retail edition or whichever edition you think is going to suit you best. The deluxe edition tiers and above will include those miniatures that we were talking about before, plus the Homelander bust. Head on over to our Facebook page, drop a like on that so that we can get everybody the variant cover issue of Dear Becky number 8. For everybody who pledges at the retail tier and above. Darick, Dan, thanks, guys. This was a dream come true for me.
All about Darick.
We love talking comics.
Here.
Anytime. Happy holidays, fellas, and thanks so much.
Happy holidays to you, Josh. Thanks, everybody, for supporting the game.
We'll talk to you soon.
And for all your fun questions. It was nice chatting with everyone.
See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.